Hey everybody, welcome to the Newscast. I'm your host, Matt.
I'm Drew.
All right, and as you may have noticed, if you're watching the video feed, there's a member missing. We don't know what's going on with Tyler. We haven't heard from him. We assume something's come up and he's just not here. So Tyler, we hope everything is well, and you should message us once in a while. It'd be good. But anyways, that means it's just going to be Drew and I this week, and we're going to talk about the Cosmic Desktop. But before we do, as is usual, we'll go around what horn there is and talk about what we've done this week in FOSS. So, Drew, take us away.
After last week's podcast, I trotted over to my fairly local Costco to grab some prescription glasses that I ordered. And as I do whenever my wife is not with me, I indulged in a little tech aisle window shopping, hoping to stumble upon a deal that even a coupon enthusiast would envy. And trust me, my wife would and does not say no to a good deal. So I am cruising to Costco, driving and listening to last week's Linux Cast podcast on de-Googling. I usually listen to pick up improvement tips, and mostly it's a mental flagellation for myself for everything that I say as far as or any dumb comment that I make or an awkward pause, So for those in the know, Costco has a secret code. An asterisk on a price tag means that this item is about to disappear forever, and there's a discount that's fairly considerable. And that was the case when I saw a new TP-Link mesh network marked down $70. So in my head, I'm hearing the three of us talk about replacing Google products and services, and I was completely in the right headspace to swap out my ancient Google Mesh Wi-Fi for a shiny new TP-Link Deco AX5000. And this time I configured those three as access points, and two of them using a wired connection and the other wireless. So with one Google replacement, I was inspired to add another, and this one is going to be more challenging. So I snagged, if you're looking at the screen, this is a Home Assistant Green, and I was hoping to replace my Google Home. So I tried to do a self-host Home Assistant with both my TrueNAS scale and a Docker container, but let's just say my confidence was shaky using those methods. So I went for a dedicated device route. Naturally, the goal was to keep everything local and ditch anything that is cloud-based. So I've been dipping my toes in the water on this one so far, and here's my first takeaway. This is going to be a marathon and not a sprint when it comes to home automation. So I've got it installed. It's recognizing a fair number of my smart devices, but we're still miles away from the look at me stage. So stay tuned. Anyway, that is my week.
I'm okay. So first off, it's hilarious that you went with the TP-Link, because that's what I've been looking for too. Because I've been looking to replace my Google Mesh Wi-Fi, because I have the exact same one you probably have, and we've been having all that internet problems. I thought it was the Wi-Fi router, and I was looking at the exact one that you bought before you sent the pictures like that. So that's
okay.
A coincidence. All right. But also, you're very brave to get into the Home Assistant stuff. I've just shied away from it. I have a few smart things in my house. Like I have, there's a as someone calls them, lady cylinder out in the living room that controls the TV. I used to have a Google Home, but that stopped working with YouTube TV, which is the most hilarious thing ever. But other than that, I don't have. Oh, I have one other thing. I have one light in the entire house that I can control with Siri. And half the time it doesn't work because my dog unplugs it from the wall. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I've got 4 of those Google Homes like throughout the house, and I've got a ton of lights, and it's a nightmare when it comes right down to it. However, I am looking forward to seeing what I can do with this Home Assistant Green. device. I think it's it's $100, and it probably will take some time to get it like situated, because there's a lot that needs to be done. But then there's a few things that are really, really streamlined as part of their scripting. But like adding certain things, you actually have to use like go into Google and into the cloud and like actually do some scripting so that it actually functions correctly. So it's going to take some time to figure everything out.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's quite a few GitHub projects out there that do a lot of that stuff for you, right? But then you have to worry about, does this thing still work, or is it, from 10 years ago, whatever. All right. So for me, this week was an interesting week. So as you know, Drew, I have been attempting to transition away from Kdenlive to DaVinci Resolve. And in the process of that, I bought myself a Windows box, and I hated it. Like, absolutely hated it. And I had thought about putting Linux on it, but DaVinci Resolve had so many problems on Linux every time that I've tried it, I just avoided it. And because it worked on Windows. Like, I'm just going to be able to use Windows. But I hit my limit on Windows. I just couldn't do it for very long. I just couldn't do it. So I installed on that extra box, because I could not get DaVinci Resolve to work on OpenSUSE. I tried for over a course of like 3 days, like many, many hours, just couldn't do it. I got very close. I got to get it to launch, but then it wouldn't activate. And all the, like, other people who've had that problem, they had some, things that you could do in order to, actually, fix that. But none of those things worked for me. So I couldn't get it to work on OpenSUSE. I couldn't get it to work with DaVinci Box. And it just wasn't working. So I decided to put Bluefin on that other computer and hook my KVM switch back up. And tried DaVinci Box first, because that's the easy way, because it's basically just a script that it runs and it installs it all for you. And runs it in a what I believe to be a Fedora distro box. And that wouldn't work either. Like, it just wouldn't work. So I didn't know. I got it to launch, but it had no codec support whatsoever. All it had was just YouTube straight up, nothing else. And that was weird, because you're supposed to have at least a few more. So I decided to install it natively, and through like many hours of pain and torture and blood, tears, sweat, and just wanting to pull all of my hair out, I got it to run. And it runs, I'm not going to say flawlessly, mostly flawlessly. It does not have window decorations, which bugs me, because I want to move this thing around. You can't even minimize it. It just is maximized all the time. But I can get, other than that, it runs very well. It will render very fast and all that stuff. And overall, I'm happy with my transition away from Windows. I don't like that I still have to have two computers to do this. KVM switches are cool, right? When I first hooked it up, I was like, wow, this technology, where it's been all my life, it's really awesome. Like, it's like nerd nirvana. But after that coolness wears off, it just, like, I now have, like, 6 or 7 HDMI cables just all over the place, and a whole bunch of USB things that weren't here before. It's just, if I took a picture of my cable mess, it's just atrocious. It's just so bad. And it wasn't good to begin with. It's just way, way worse now. So, I don't know. I learned some tricks while I was installing it on Bluefin, where I might be able to try it again on OpenSUSE and see if I can get it to work. Maybe. I'm hoping that that's the case, because then I can just use that other computer, as a review machine or something. And I don't have to have it, hooked up to a KVM in order to do it. So that's basically what I've been doing this week. It's just that whole process that I just described took days. Because I spent hours trying to get on OpenSUSE, then it was another whole day to get to work on Bluefin, and it just... If the DaVinci Resolve people just happen to be working or watching this, please, for the love of all that's holy, make a Flatpak or even a Snap. I don't care. Just choose one. Make it one of those things. Everyone who uses it on Linux would just, they'd kiss your feet. It would be the best thing in the history of the world for DaVinci Resolve users, because it'd be just Flatpak install Resolve. It'd be awesome instead of all this nonsense. And one of the biggest hurdles you have to face is that none of the libraries that it expects are in the right place on any of these distros, or at least the distros that I've tried it on. So you have to move them to the right directory. If it was a Flatpak, they'd all be in there. It's what the hell the package format was for. It drives me nuts. Okay. So that was my week in Linux. Also, I still hate GNOME, just as a side thing. So I do.
I think we're going to talk a little bit about GNOME probably and some of these other desktop environments in the next
Yeah,
hour.
I'm sure we are, because there's going to be things. So that is a good place to start, I guess, or at least kick off the main topic. Because if you are anywhere involved at all in the Linux community, even if it's just watching random YouTubers talk about Linux, you couldn't have missed that Cosmic Desktop came out in alpha within the last week or so, and almost every Linux YouTuber has made a video about it in some form or fashion. Except for this one, by the way. I haven't made one. And other than this, and Drew, right? I just have no interest in covering something that's in alpha. I talked about this on Mastodon. Until it's in alpha, there's just no point for it to me, because it's just going to change. So tonight, if you were expecting us to review it, you're going to be very disappointed, because neither one of us have actually used it. But instead, what I want to talk about is just its existence in the first place. And really, the question could have been, are there too many desktop environments? Because, well, that's going to be the question. That's kind of what we're going to transition to. But let's first focus, at least specifically, a little bit on Cosmic itself. So originally, Pop! OS was a GNOME-based distro. And in traditional GNOME/GTK fashion, people who based their stuff on GTK got pissed off because of the rigidity of the people who developed GTK. And this is a story as old as time. Budgie had a problem with it. I mean, Mate and XFC, they've all had words to say about the whole GTK stuff. So Pop! OS, not surprising that they also had problems with the GTK stuff. So they have decided to make themselves their own desktop environment. So Drew, just to start us off, do you think that this is the proper way to go about things, and what are your general thoughts about Cosmic Desktop?
I like it in terms of. I remember a couple weeks ago we did the podcast on Debian, and whether that was something that could be like if Debian was the only desktop. I'm sorry, if the only distro. And I'm gonna use a couple things that we talked about at the time. As far as innovation is concerned, I think we need more innovation when it comes right down to it in the Linux community. So to take on a project as ambitious as creating your own desktop environment, I am applauding Pop! OS for doing that. I think that, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think I like any of the desktop environments right now. I have never been a big GNOME. If I had to rank them, I would put XFCE number 1. I would put GNOME number 2. I would put probably KDE last. And I don't even know where the others fall in, like LXQT and stuff like that. So yeah, KDE would, I don't know if that's going to get me people like unsubscribing from my channel, but at the same time, I'm just not a fan of KDE at all. And what's weird is, I'm going to talk about GNOME for just a second though, because I use DWM as my environment, basically my window manager. And the fact is that it has some similarities with GNOME in that you have to patch it in order to get additional functionality. And with GNOME, you need to use extensions to get some new functionality. So I don't know why I have this thing about GNOME when I'm doing exactly the same thing with DWM. But when it comes right down to it, I love the fact that Cosmic, that the Pop! OS guys have taken on this ambitious project, and from what I have seen, I'm digging it. I think that it has, especially since I'm a tiling window manager user, the fact that it has tiling built in as one of its features is really appealing to me.
Okay, so my general thoughts on it are, okay, so I'm going to try to set aside my original question, are there too many desktop environments? We'll talk about that in a minute. But just in general on the Cosmic stuff, I think the desktop environment is fine. I understand why they've done it. And I think that their ambition is admirable. I don't know. Let me actually, before I get into the whole negative Nelly thing, let me talk some positive things that I'm looking forward to. There's never been a desktop environment that was built from the ground up to be a Wayland desktop. There's obviously been Wayland compositors that are like that, because they all are. No, I mean, you could say Sway is based on i3, but it's really not. It's completely different. It just happens to use the configuration file, right? So those are the window manager side of things. They're all built from the ground up. But from a desktop environment standpoint, every single desktop environment we have has existed before Wayland and had to adopt it afterwards, and had to go through the transition of doing the whole, Xorg to Wayland conversion thing. And that has been varying levels of painful for literally every single one of them, right? Like the ones that have been well funded, like GNOME and KDE, they have done the transitions, but it has been painful. And then you have like Budgie and XFC and Mate. None of them really knew what they were doing until fairly recently. So it will be interesting to see how that built from the ground up mentality, focusing just on Wayland, affects it, right? Because I think it'll be very interesting to try, because it's just that's where all their focus has been on. They haven't had to bifurcate their attention on both Xorg and Wayland, because as far as I know, they're only going to do Wayland. It'd be actually really surprising to me if they're doing like an Xorg fallback. So that part there is very interesting to me. The thing that I don't understand, I guess, all that much, is that they're basically rewriting everything else. It's not just the underlying stuff that they're doing, but they're also like they've developed their own terminal, they have their own code editor, they're going to do their own file manager, all these stuff, right? And like, I get it, they're dealing with their own graphical stack and stuff like that, so they want it all to fit in and be able to mess around with their themes. So I understand it. But it also, and this is something I've talked about before, it also feels like this is something I complain about with Mint all the time, they're reinventing the wheel when it already exists. Like, no, one thing I will give the Pop! OS team credit for is that they have taken some existing things, pick and choose to make the job easier, which is not something that Mint usually does. Usually when they decide to do an app, they just, they do it on their own. Or they use someone else's. Like, there's no happy medium, whereas with Pop! OS stuff, they have, like with their terminal or whatever, they're basing it on Alacrity. So that, makes at least some sense to me. Like, they're not completely like, oh, we're just going to invent a brand new terminal. Like, we have a lot of terminals, none of, like, unless you're going to give us some crazy new feature, I don't see the need for another one, right? And I think that's where a lot of my pessimism comes into it. Like, what is this going to provide that... No, let me rephrase this. What is this going to provide to the user that couldn't be had with another desktop environment that already existed, right? Now, because there's a lot of things that's going to provide them as a development team. Like, they have, full control over it. They don't have to deal with GTK anymore. They don't have to deal with the GNOME guys, with the GNOME apps and stuff like that. So they have plenty of reasons from a development standpoint to do this. I'm just not sure from a user perspective if it makes entirely complete sense. So I don't know. Thoughts on that, Drew?
I don't want to say I disagree completely, but at the same time, I understand where you're coming from. However, I think that there is a definite need for something that is different than what we currently have. So, and to your point, as far as like, a file manager, at this point, from what I've seen, the Cosmic Alpha file manager is nothing special. I mean, it's really, really kind of bare bones at this point. But we're talking about, I don't know what the development schedule will be like, but I agree, that's not very special at all. So it looks like it's reinventing the wheel. However, there's so many other things that I am really kind of interested in, and that's the automatic tiling and the adaptive layouts that I think are interesting. I saw a couple videos where people were reviewing the keyboard shortcuts. Did not look like it was ready for prime time. However, just looking at how the automatic tiling was working, there was one thing in particular that was kind of interesting was it looked a little bit, especially in the tiling part of it, which is what I'm more interested in as far as, between stacking and tiling. I'm definitely more interested in that adaptive layout, how tiling will actually be utilized. It looked like when you were focused on a specific window and then added another either window or application, it almost looked a little bit like BSPWM in pre-selection. And I thought because pre-selection BSPWM, I don't know that hardly anybody uses that feature in BSPWM. However, it's a very powerful feature that I thought was, that somebody should use more. I don't use it that much anymore, obviously, because I'm on a different window manager. But there's grouping windows, there's window tabbing, and you can even tab windows while you're tiling. Stacking windows rather while you're tiling. And I don't know. I think that there's some of this innovation, I'm going to go back to it. The innovation aspect of this desktop environment is cool and intriguing. And I think definitely necessary. I think that there is a market for it for sure.
Well, okay. So I don't doubt that there's a market for it, because there's a market for, two people use this thing and it's a market, right? There's definitely going to be people out there. There's people like Nate who are very into Pop! OS. They're going to love this. There are a lot of people who like to try new things. They're going to like it at least for a little while. So I don't doubt that people are going to use it. I don't doubt that it's going to continue on, because Pop! OS probably makes some money along the line. So they're going to be able to fund this thing for at least some amount of time. And they're obviously putting a lot of effort and development time into it. So it's going to stick around. It's not like some random dude who lives in a forum decided to create their, a desktop environment and oh my God, 6 months from now it's just gone. It's one of the reasons why I always complain about Budgie, because Budgie has transitioned so many times and changed their minds in so many different ways. And, I just worry about their longevity, where I don't have fear here that it's going to just not go, it's just going away. My main, thing is that I don't know how I became the old guy in this conversation. Sorry.
Wow. Okay.
I'm just saying.
Wow.
Maybe it's my fear of change, but I've seen so many attempts at this that have just not worked out well, I guess. Because, there was one that was based on, the successor to Qt. So, someone in the KDE organization decided that when Qt was doing their whole licensing shenanigans, where they weren't going to want to open source it anymore, and then they decided to open source it, and they were going back and forth and stuff. Someone created something, I think it's called Maui Kit or something like that. I may be wrong on the names, because I'm fucking horrible at names. But anyways, it was going to be the spiritual successor to Qt or something like that. Or maybe it's just somebody decided they were going to do something and it had something to do that. But anyways, they created a new desktop environment. It was I'm not sure what the name of the desktop environment was, but it was on a distro called Nitrux or something. Nutrux or something like that. And they too decided they were going to just rewrite literally everything in this brand new graphical stack. Now, they don't have the resources that Pop! OS has to throw behind it, so the development time was much longer. Another example, kind of at least, is Elementary OS with Pantheon, right? They had quite a bit of resources behind them, had a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of users who got into that stuff. They had a vision, despite the fact that I disagreed with a lot of it, that you can't argue that they didn't have a vision for what they wanted to do. They had a way for developers to make money and all this stuff. They had this whole ecosystem, and then, some of it was the infighting amongst the developers that caused the downfall, but also it's just, it took them so long to actually make that thing reasonably good, that it just kind of fell away, by the wayside, even though technically it's still being developed. It's just when's the next version going to come out? My guess is never, Yeah. So I've just worries, because I'm a worrier at heart, that despite the fact that they have resources to put into this, and they've obviously shown dedication to do it, I don't know if they can pull it off and make it good long enough to actually work.
To get some traction?
Yeah. Also,
in the market? Okay.
Yeah. Also, one of the coolest things about Linux, Drew, is that I can take like Dolphin, right? And I can run that thing on, whatever distro I want, whatever desktop environment I want. And I don't doubt that you're going to be able to do that with the applications you get from Cosmic. It just feels like we already live in package hell. I mean, having a whole nother package stack that we're going to have to download if we're going to do this thing. I mean, and chances are you're not going to want to do that. But people do take a lot of KDE applications, use them in GNOME. People use a lot of GNOME applications and use them in KDE. And whenever you do that, you have to end up, especially if you're downloading like a KDE application. You've probably done this, Drew, and you see that 12,000 dependencies that come along with it.
I cannot stomach anything that's like KDE or Qt based. I just can't do it. I just one of those things where I have this mental block on installing anything from those packages.
Okay, another example, like you ever anything Python based. Python does the exact same thing. We'll pull a lot of libraries down. Or if you've ever installed something like Pandoc is based on Haskell and will pull down every Haskell library. Things like that, right? And this is going to be yet another situation where if you want to use one of these applications, or if you want to use the desktop environment, you're going to be downloading
the whole stack.
It's going to be the whole thing, right? And gotta remember, I'm not a developer, but I just have fears that this gargantuan task that they've set themselves is just too much for anyone outside of a huge foundation to do. I mean, no, if you really truly think about it, what desktop environments outside of GNOME, KDE, and Cinnamon are really, truly, honestly successful and can be considered mainstream? You know what I mean? Yeah, XFCE is there, but it's only there because it's been around forever, right?
Yeah, and that might be kind of like the XFCE is more modular when it comes right down to, you can say, okay, I just want that. I just want Thunar, or I just want, I don't know, something else from the XFCE packages and stuff like that. So I'm hoping, I have no idea how Cosmic or Pop! OS has done their development. I'm wondering if it's going to be more modular. I mean, right now, it can't be because you're just installing the entire alpha build. But if you could just take certain parts of it, that would be interesting. I don't know. I look at it in terms of what I would use personally. I would not use anything that we currently have. So because of that, I'm interested in Pop. In Cosmic, because I would not, I think I would give GNOME another shot, honestly. And then XFCE, until they're ready for prime time with Wayland, no, not doing that either. So I have no desire to use a full desktop environment until it works on Wayland, until XFCE works on Wayland, or Pop. Sorry, I keep saying that. Or Cosmic is out of beta. That would be interesting to me, because I'm not, like I said, I'm not using any of these other ones. I'm not even interested in them. This was more interesting to me.
That's fascinating. So you talked a little bit about the tiling, and I kind of got diverted in traditional Matt fashion. Their tiling, as far from what I saw, is basically just them re-implementing and probably rewriting in Rust the Cosmic tiling GNOME shell extension that they already have. And if that's the case, then I'm not as impressed. Maybe they fixed it. I breezed through a lot of that part, but here's my thing. Anyone who's ever tried to implement tiling in a desktop environment has utterly failed. Every single time. Like, without fail, they've not successfully done it. And now, let me rephrase that just a little bit. They failed. If you're a tiling window manager user, then gone to use this thing, then you're always going to be disappointed in these plugins or extensions or whatever, because it's just not the same. Now, if you are a desktop environment user and have never used a tiling window manager, this stuff probably makes way more sense. But if you are used to, completely configurable key bindings in every sense of the form, window rules that you can do whatever you want, all this stuff, right? None of that stuff usually transitions well into a GUI setup like what the extensions in GNOME or Polonium or stuff on KDE actually allow you to do. It just doesn't translate nearly as well as you'd expect it to. And that's some of that is because, there's a lot of work that has to go in order to make a GUI settings panel for this stuff. And that means that you necessarily cut out a lot of the stuff that you'd put into a configuration file. But also, and this probably isn't true, but every time I tried one of those, you get the feeling that those people who develop that have never used a tiling window manager in their entire lives. It just feels that way a lot of times. So my thing about the tiling is that I'm worried that it's just going to be what has always been. And you talked about innovation during that, and that's my cynicism coming. Is like, is it really innovation if they're just making copies of what has already existed in the past? I mean, is it really truly innovation?
I tend to think it is, because I think that I can't name, other than your video, Matt, on XFCE with i3. You did that video, I don't know, 2 years ago or something like that. And you did. Yeah. I mean, adding that kind of functionality to a full blown desktop environment, it can be done. But when you're talking about Wayland now, and and to your point, you're talking about developing an entire desktop environment that's never seen Xorg, never done it. This is really kind of cool. And I'm just going to refer to Brody Robertson's video on the review that he did on the Cosmic Desktop. It was interesting because he is definitely a tiling window manager guy. I mean, he went from BSPWM to Awesome WM, and he's been in KDE for a long time, for waiting for Cosmic to arrive, basically, because he was like, I hate it. I hate KDE. I'm just using it until something else is, something I can use something else. And when it comes to just, I'm going to keep going back because that's me. That's in my wheelhouse. I want to see something in my workflow that tiles. And if Cosmic can provide that. Now, currently, to your point, Matt, also, right now in the alpha, there are no window rules. 0. So you can't, let's say, I want OBS to open up on Workspace 8. You can't do that until they actually implement window rules. But I also know that you have a 3-monitor setup. So you can use key bindings to quickly go, I'm going to go to the left. And it goes to the monitor that happens to be on your left rather than the center of your, to your center console. When you're talking about tiling, it's opening up on one workspace and then you can, like I said, you can tile depending on what you're currently focused on. You can manipulate the actual layout, which is something that tilers can't even do yet. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you have a specific layout for DWM, you have a specific layout for BSPWM and so on. I think that Cosmic really kind of breaks the rules there and say, you can have a layout unlike you've ever seen before, because we're actually doing this kind of pre-selection for you. Now, I think there's definitely going to be new things that will be introduced into the software as we're going forward. But yeah, the range of keyboard shortcuts is small at this point. There's no window rules. There is some window tabbing, which is say, for example, you have one section that is tiled. You can actually add stacking to that section of the window, which is very interesting to me. So that extension that I was talking about, which is made by PopOS, does the same thing. You can drag things on top I'm
of each other.
I'm aware of that. Yeah.
That extension's not bad. Every time I've tried it, my initial impression is oh my God, this is not anything like a tiling window manager. And then I have to kind of remove my brain from that mindset and think this is not those extensions, whether it's on the GNOME side or the KDE side, those things aren't made really for tiling window manager people, because tiling window manager people, they're using tiling window managers. They're not coming to use GNOME or KDE. They're like you, they have no interest in it, right? though that's for people who are GNOME users or they're KDE users, and they want to have some tiling aspect, right? And that's where my mindset has to kind of go, because I don't know if you've noticed, I'm a little bit of a naysayer when it comes to this thing. Like, no, right? No, I just want to be clear. I'm not anti like innovation, new things, at least not always. But I've always tried to. The Linux community, specifically Linux developers, I should say, they have a tendency to do things that don't need doing, like new package managers, creating new distributions, creating new desktop environments, creating new window managers. I mean, they see something that they like or they disagree with, and they decide to go make their own. That's one of the things that makes open source kind of great, right? If a developer sees they want to do something and it hasn't been done, or someone is doing it but not the way they want it done, they can just go make something different. But it also, for me, it always, and this is a stupid mindset. I'll be 100% absolutely frank with you that this is a stupid mindset, but when I see someone recreating something that already exists, it makes me think, well, what if they'd put their efforts into making what we already have better? And that's, like I said, that's a stupid mindset to have, because first off, developers are free-willed human beings. They can do whatever the hell they want. They're not there to cater to my needs. But also, if everyone took that mindset, we'd be using Windows. You know what I mean? So it's like I said, it's a stupid mindset to have, but there's still there's a portion of my brain that looks at that. It's one of the reasons why I've had so many problems over the years with Mint. Like they constantly do that, where they feel like they're reinventing the wheel over and over and over again, and for weird reasons they decided to do it twice, where they have a Ubuntu and a Debian edition, where they're basically doing things twice over and over again. And this, when I first heard the Cosmic thing, I understood why they were doing it, but also that stupid part of my brain thought, well, GNOME's open source, just for GNOME, Now that's a horrendous idea. Nobody would ever should do that. That would be that code base is just, I'm sure, monstrous. Why would, it would be much easier to do what Cosmic did, which is to start over again. But again, that stupid side of my brain had that thought. And I think that's going to be my challenge going forward, is to kill off that stupid part of my brain and think about this as something that could be very interesting. But it's interesting, Drew, because you are like I used to be. Like, you are a tiling window manager user. You have no interest in desktop environments whatsoever. But then I switched, and I was like that for a long time. But now I'm a desktop environment user. I had a hard time actually going back to a tiling window manager recently. I tried. Now, part of that is that there are no good Wayland compositors.
That's totally fair.
Right?
Yeah.
Hyperland has a stupid bug, and it's been around for ages, and I don't think that it's a Hyperland related thing. I think it's like a Wayland thing, where certain Electron applications just refuse to accept keyboard and mouse input sometimes on random monitors. And it's not just like system-wide, it's just like I have 3 monitors. One of them, if I have an Electron app on there, it just will not accept keyboard or mouse input. I have to literally switch that app to another monitor, and it works fine. It's the stupidest thing, and it only has thing to do with Electron, because even if you start the Electron app in Wayland mode, it still happens. It's really stupid. And like Hyperland does that really weird bug thing stuff constantly for me. Now, other people have had better luck with it. I haven't. But Hyperland is like the best of the bunch, and that's weird to say, right? And I worry a little bit, back to Matt worrying a little bit, with the Cosmic thing. Like, this thing's going to come out, and then you're going to have assholes like me who will review it. And this, no matter how long they take, no matter how many features they put in, how polished it is, how stable it is, assholes like me are still going to go in there and tear it apart. Because there's no way possible that it's going to have the full-featured, whole, well-rounded experience that something like GNOME or KDE had, because they've been around for 30 years, right? Right?
That's true.
There's just there's no way physically possible that they will have had time to make it that well done, right? So let's just say I get in there, I'm going to do the cosmic thing when it comes out in full release, because that's the first time I'll take a look at it. I'm not going to look at the alpha, none of that stuff. I have no interest in using alpha software because shit changes, right? So this thing comes out and I install it. I'm going to do my long-term review, and the first thing I try is that tiling thing, and it sucks. And not that it sucks like it's not functional. It sucks that it doesn't do the things that I wanted to do. The first thing I'm going to mention in my review is that it doesn't do the things that I wanted to do. And if this thing comes out and has a whole bunch of assholes like Matt make a review and say things like that, it's going to be bumpy for a while. And I think that they'll be able to get through it, and then obviously they're not going to pay any heed to what I have to say about it anyways. But I mean, it just feels like...
Well, I think you need to give them a little bit of a pass because, you've mentioned this many times that KDE's been around for how long and still
buggy and shit.
Is very buggy. So,
yeah, that's true. I don't know. My brain works in weird ways, right? Where I'm going to look at it and want it to be good. And I worry that I worry about my own objectivity, I guess is what I'm saying. Is I worried about it just a little bit because there's so much hype around it. Because it's been a long time since we've had a new desktop environment. Like Budgie has been around. Budgie is like the last one that was new, I think. I mean, I suppose LXQT probably came out after that, but that was just a Qt reimplementation of LXDE. So it feels like we haven't had a truly good mainstream brand new desktop environment in years, maybe decades even, right? And that's why, I mean, you're excited about it. I'm somewhat excited about it because I want to try it, but I'm also of the stupid mindset, like, well, why does this thing exist when we have perfectly good... And the thing is, like, there is no good... You're right, Drew. There's no good desktop environment. There's not other... I mean, XFCE is... You're right. That is the closest, I think, to my idea of perfection, but it lives in the past. It never is going to be up to date in terms of technology like KDE or GNOME, because they don't have the team for it, and it's not what it's for. It's meant to be
one dude practically,
right. Plus,
one guy.
It's the Debian of desktop environments. It's meant to be the rock. It's like that thing's never going to die on you because it doesn't change. That's what it's meant to be for, right? But outside of XFCE and whatever, none of the rest of them are very good. GNOME has many problems. I'm using KDE right now, and I can't tell you the number of times I look at this thing like, maybe I should go back to GNOME, and then I'll use... I actually have done this several times. Like, I actually talked about this in the podcast one time where I had Plasma, I uninstalled Plasma, I installed GNOME, used it for a few hours, realized I hate GNOME still, and then went back to KDE. Still had the KDE problems that I was having, so I decided to go back to GNOME. Like all over the period of like 72 hours, I switched back and forth between GNOME and KDE, and that's my experience with desktop environments. Is none of them are very good, and especially when it comes to Wayland, right? The Wayland compatibility for these things, like if it's not GNOME or KDE, the rest of them don't do Wayland. Like
yeah. That's true.
War Thunder told me the other day that Wayland for Cinnamon is like 2026. Like that's a long ways away.
Yeah.
XFCE might make it faster than that. I'm not.
Well, I have been looking at the XFCE kind of development cycle right now, and they have built out a lot of the Wayland packages. There is some stuff still lagging behind. However, I think that once it's ready, that's going to be another option for us. And I know that you've kind of said, I'm not going back to Xorg because of your hardware more than anything else. But when as a Debian user, I'm not that far away from when, let's say, Buster, Debian Buster basically had, you had your XFCE, you had your KDE, and you had your GNOME, and none of them were any good. Not one was any good, and all of them kind of buggy. And we're not. I mean, Buster is only 2 cycles ago. We're at Bullseye was definitely better. Bookworm, I think, was the first one where you could say, yeah, all of the desktop environments at this point are stable and are fairly feature rich. And I'm hoping that when we go, because Debian doesn't have that many, updates with regard to desktop environments. So, when it's available to install, Cosmic is going to be something that, built on Rust, very slick, a modern aesthetic. I think that there's a definite need for, at least from my perspective. I'm not a fan of any of the desktop environments. Like I said before, XFCE is number one, and they don't have Wayland. So, where do I go? I don't go to Wayland at all. And yes, I've tried Sway. I know that we've talked about this in the past. It's just meh. That's the fact. It's meh. So I don't know. When I see something new and shiny, I kind of gravitate towards that because it's new and shiny. And I think that it has some real interesting use cases for a good workflow. And that's really all I care about, is if this has a good workflow, then it's something that I can use long-term.
Yeah. I think that what I'm going to look for is I want to be able to install it on something that's not Pop! OS, first of all. Because I'm not really interested in Ubuntu, at all.
Fair.
I'd much rather if it was Debian, that'd be cool. Just I don't care for Ubuntu. So when it comes out, I'll probably install it on OpenSUSE. It'll eventually come here. Somebody may have already packaged the alpha for all I know. I don't know. I didn't look. So eventually, I'm gonna try this thing out. And you've given me a little hope. Just listen to some look. Nate's awesome. He does the editing for the podcast. Without him, the podcast probably wouldn't be edited at all. We'd just be posting it online as is. But he's a Pop! OS, an admitted Pop! OS fanboy. So I can't take his objectivity seriously, just like I can't take my own objectivity seriously when it comes to OpenSUSE. I'm an OpenSUSE fanboy. You can't trust me when it comes to OpenSUSE because I'm going to say it's awesome. It may not be awesome. It's just maybe I'm living in the OpenSUSE matrix. So when I try this thing, I'm going to when you were talking, it gave me a little bit of hope because you're not of the. If this had been developed by Debian, then maybe I wouldn't, be able to take your objectivity seriously. But for this, it just gave me a little hope. My last thing negative that I want to say about it is why did you have to make everything just look like a GNOME app? That's basically what it still kind of looks like. Is they just took GNOME and rewrote it in Rust. That's what it kind of looks like to me. And that's where I wanted to push back earlier a little bit about the whole innovation thing, because it does look like they're just re-implementing for a lot of the, at least some of the part, what they already knew or what they already had. It just looks like the GNOME version of Pop! OS that they already had, but now it's just going to be written in Rust. That's just surface level. Right, that's just you see a screenshot. That's what it kind of looks like. Once you delve deep in, if you see, you saw the videos or whatever, they get into the settings or whatever. It doesn't look like GNOME at all, right? But that surface level impression, when I first saw that, I was like, that kind of just looks like GNOME to me. If you're just gonna come out and create something that looks like GNOME, what was all this about? What did they? What was the purpose? And once you get past that skin deep thing, there's a lot more that's interesting. The tiling stuff's very interesting. The fact that it's written in Rust can be interesting because, supposedly, very, very fast or whatever. I don't know. I'm also interested to see how other distributions react to this because, they're going to be small distros. Hell, some of them already have. Who was it? I think it was Catchy or Crunchy OS this week decided that they already have a GNOME version of their ISO, or not a GNOME version, but a Cosmic version of their ISO. So there's going to be smaller ones that do that, but it'll be interesting to see is there going to be an Ubuntu flavor for this eventually? Are we going to see something with a Manjaro flavor or a Fedora spin? I'm sure we probably will, and it'll be interesting to see how those are kind of accepted by the community because. People do like new things, like to try new things, but it will be interesting to see how it endures, past that initial excitement. And that's the reason why I go back to the whole initial reviews thing, because, we're all everyone who uses that for the first time is going to judge it based on their criteria of what they're expecting, right? You're gonna go in expecting that tiling to be pretty good. And if that tiling's not pretty good, you're probably going to have a little bit more of a negative aspect on it once you've used it, right? I'm going to be the same way, and everyone who uses is going to have that same expectation. So if this thing doesn't come out and at least be usable, it's going to turn a lot of people away, and they'll just go back to what they've always used.
Something that you talked about a minute ago and said something about Cinnamon desktop environment is not going to be ready for prime time like anytime soon. Basically, you're talking about GNOME, KDE, Cinnamon, and if Cosmic can kind of like get to that third level, I'd be curious about how that would happen. I mean, I can see how that would happen. Let's put it that way. You can say, oh, they're going to jump over XFCE and Cinnamon in maybe one shot here because they're maybe miles ahead. They don't have to go back and then reinvent the wheel with X11. They're inventing their own desktop environment, without any consideration to X11. So that's a real possibility that they get to that level that quickly if they can get to market that fast.
So conspiracy theory and this is not going to happen. Part of the reason why it's not going to happen is because Pop! OS is obviously controlled by a company in itself, and it's going to be mostly in their control. But Ubuntu has constantly had problems with the GNOME project. Like, they basically themselves have rewritten GNOME in many ways, right? They've gone through, and a lot of the
with
stuff,
Unity.
Yeah. So they've tried to make it look like their brand of stuff. They've put a lot of different features in. They have a lot of different extensions that they've put in order to make that thing themselves. So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, just a conspiracy theory that Cosmic ends up being so good that Ubuntu can just take Cosmic as their main thing.
Oh, man.
Like that'd be interesting because the GNOME project has pissed so many developers off. That's the reason why Cosmic exists. Like, if the GNOME people were easy to work with and weren't constantly messing shit up, Cosmic wouldn't exist. Like, that's just 100% the truth. And I don't think that situation changes ever, right? Because they're just not easy to work with. They have their set goals in mind of how they want their desktop environment to work, which is fine. But so many projects base their distro primarily on using GNOME that not being flexible with that community, not necessarily the broader community who's batshit crazy, but the developer community that bases their stuff on it, not being flexible to that community has caused them so many problems. And I don't think that they care because they're only developing it for Fedora, and Fedora and them are always in lockstep anyways. But outside of that small area, right, you have the situation where the desktop environment community or whatever uses GNOME almost as if in protest, right? Like they can't use KDE because KDE is just not user friendly at all for new users. Like, it's just not. Like if you like, even if you like KDE, you have to admit that it's just not. It's not, ready or good for new users, no matter what they've tried in the past.
It's overwhelming for new users. It's just, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Too many freaking features, like, and they don't. It's not as if you can trust to say, this is the feature set of KDE. That's it, right? It doesn't end. Like, they're always putting new shit in and cramming it in, and it's always changing. It's not a great situation for new users, right? So the only other place they can turn to really is GNOME. And that has caused them so many problems. Like, it's always really been surprising to me that, Cinnamon has been around for a long time. And yeah, the GNOME or the Mint developers can be prickly as well. But you would think that because of their anti-GNOME stance, like, they're so anti-GNOME, they use really old versions of the GNOME apps because they don't want to use Libadwaita. So it's always surprised me a little bit that Cinnamon hasn't kind of been more popular with other distros beside Mint, and there must be some political reasons or something behind that. Maybe it's a technical reason. I don't know. Something there behind it, because they're the disinterest in working with GNOME always feels so there that surprises me that something else hasn't come around and kind of taken its place. And that's where maybe that's the opening for Cosmic, is to be the desktop environment that kind of can be relied on outside of GNOME. Or maybe it's not just like the desktop environment. Maybe the toolkit that they use to build their applications, maybe that takes over or something, or influences GTK and kind of becomes another player in the market. That'd be interesting. I mean, because everything is GTK, right? I mean, and it's kind of a monopoly at this point, because nobody besides KDE is building shit on Qt, because that too is not reliable in terms of licensing stuff. Eventually, the Qt corporation is going to make that thing closed source, and then KDE's fucked, right? So, I mean, that situation there, the desktop environment is very interesting to me, and I have my worries, as I talked about, but the kind of the where this thing fits in, and if anybody else kind of can either pull parts of it out and use it, or, you know, they can use the whole thing, that part is very, very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. War Thunder. Was this? I don't know who he's talking to. Is he talking to you or me?
It really could apply to both of us, actually.
I guess
so. You're going to have to be more specific. But no, that was me. I did say, I made a video that said I would die on
true. That's
using
right.
X11. They could pry it out of my cold, dead hands. See, the problem with Thunderbud is that I bought a stupid monitor. And it is a stupid monitor. It's the most ridiculous aspect ratio you've ever seen in your entire life. It's like 21 by 22 or some weird aspect ratio. And it also is completely different than my other monitor, and Xorg doesn't handle that well. So I had to bite the bullet and go to Wayland. So yeah, thank you for the super chat. I truly appreciate it. Yeah, I don't know. The Cosmic thing is just very interesting, because we don't get it. Drew, we don't get new things. I mean, we get new window managers all the time, new desktop environments.
Yeah, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we get like new window managers that have a shelf life of like 6 months. But when you're talking about a desktop environment, I mean, the amount of effort it takes to build out a full desktop environment, that is something that takes. I mean, looking at Pop OS's development cycle, it's taken quite a while to get to this point. You know, they're only just beginning. So I don't know. I think this is, you were right when it comes to this, the Linux community is rich with desktop environments, and looking at Cosmic at first glance may mean that it's, it could seem redundant, but I think this is unique. I really do. I think this is unique when it comes to a modern design. It has it's a fresh alternative. Let's put it that way.
It'll be interesting to see what they do with NVIDIA stuff, especially older stuff. Like maybe they have their because like even the newer cards. So I bought a 4070 Ti and used it in my main rig for basically a day. I was gonna say a few days, but it ended up being like a day and a half. And granted, I only used it on KDE. But it was not good. Like there were stutters and stuff. And another thing about the NVIDIA stuff is that it's so reliant on the drivers being good. And unfortunately, the NVIDIA drivers are kind of like KDE, where you'll have one good release and it'll be awesome, and then you'll have another good release and they'll just have completely fucked it over. And the problem with all of that is like everyone has an NVIDIA card, basically. Like they own the market. Granted, the thing that kind of goes against that is that Pop OS is a hardware manufacturer, so they will have a better time making that stuff work, at least on their hardware. I don't know how it will translate over into hardware on other distros. Also, I'm not a Mac or a Pop OS guy. I wonder how their support is going to be when someone installs this thing on OpenSUSE and has some bugs. You know what I mean? Are they just going to say? Are they going to say, well, we don't support it on anything other than Pop OS, or are they going to open that support up? I mean,
that's a good point.
Are they going to go the Arch direction, where they can basically, if you have a Manjaro problem and you go into the Arch forums, you're going to get set on fire?
But deservedly so, man.
You should be using Manjaro in the first place. But yeah, all right. Anyways, I think that is it. You have anything else to say on Cosmic?
No,
Desktop?
we're good.
All right, good. Let's go ahead and wrap this up then and move on to the closing section of the podcast. This section here under protest has been named Nuggies of the Week. It's under protest because I can't stand the name. It's one of those names that just doesn't set right in my brain. So, but anyways, this is a section where we go through and talk about either apps or picks or tricks or whatever. Basically, we can do whatever we want. We usually just use apps, but of the week, we would like to share them with you. So, Drew, your Nuggie of the week.
So I recall that you used Cirques. I believe that was either a Nuggie of the week or it was on our episode when we talked about tricks and hacks to Linux. But regardless, doesn't matter. I decided that I was going to install my own privacy-focused search engine, and it's called Whoogle. WHOOGL is a privacy-focused search engine, and it provides Google results, but it strips out all the tracking to those results. So it offers a way to search the web while keeping your searches private. It returns, basically by doing that, I feel like I'm, again, trying to kind of de-Google myself, even though I think a lot of times their search results are better than most. I don't want I want it to be more private. So this gives me at least some semblance of privacy when I'm using my self-hosted Whoogle.
Yeah, so I went with Cirques. I really do. There's something about being the only user of a search engine that kind of makes you feel kind of cool. Like, I'm the only person who uses my instance of Cirques. No one else is going to use it, and that makes me feel special. It's a weird feeling. I don't know.
Same.
But it's a nerd thing. Other people won't understand. All right, so my Nuggie of the week is actually a Mastodon client. So this is a Mastodon client called, and I'm going to butcher this name, it's called Statuzer, STATUZER.com. It's a web-based Mastodon client. And if you used TweetDeck back in the day, before Elon killed it and made it, paid only, this is kind of like that. Now, there are several Mastodon clients that are like this. There's one called Mastodeck. There's one called Plytix or starts with a P. I don't remember what the hell it's called. It's a really weird name. But anyways, there's several of them like this. But this one here is my favorite. And yeah, it's not open source, so if that bugs you, you can't use it. But if that doesn't bother you, it is very well designed and it works phenomenally well. Like, it blows the default advanced web editor for Mastodon out of the water in terms of features. It has basically threaded support, so it'll actually show you in your feed if someone's part of a thread. It'll show you the last three, and they'll all be kind of attached in a cool graphic. And also, if you've ever used Twitter before, there's always this little plus button on every one of your tweets, and basically allows you to create your own thread. Statuzer allows you to do that as well. So while it's not officially Mastodon supported, so it just kind of shows up as a whole bunch of replies to your own tweet, it does allow you to at least streamline creating your own thread, which is really nice. And also it just looks fantastic. So if you're into the whole design thing, everyone's profile picture kind of is a backdrop to each of their tweets, so it kind of offsets the stuff. It's really, really nice. If you're a power user of Mastodon, this thing is definitely going to be something that you should check out. So that's the Statuzer, and it's a weird name, but I found it and it was that's really cool. And it's still developed, so the problem with Mastodon clients is that they get abandoned a lot, and that's fine that developers can do whatever they want, but it's kind of hard to find one that hasn't been just completely abandoned. So that is my Nuggie of the week. So that is it for the Linux cast. And apparently Tyler did eventually get back with us. Apparently it was Windows' fault. Somebody blamed it on Mac earlier. Turns out it was Windows 11 fault. So Tyler hopefully will be back with us.
Damn Windows.
Yeah. If only he could talk his friends into using Linux like a normal person. Anyways, so he'll be back with us next week. If you want to watch us live, you can do so every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. We usually go for about an hour and a half or so. Last week we were closer to the 2-hour mark, and that pissed Nate off to no end. So we try not to get to 2 hours, but Matt rambles. If you haven't watched my channel, you wouldn't know this, but I ramble a lot. It's just It's the way that it is.
I'm saying nothing.
Yeah. I saw it on your face there, Drew. You know it's true. I know it's true. I can't help it. I'm rambling right now. It's literally happening as we speak. It's like it's ramble inception. But anyways, Tuesday nights, 8:00 p.m. Eastern time on youtube.com/LinuxCast. We have a fun time, so join us live if you want to. If you can't join us live, though, the edited version will be posted on Saturday afternoons or Saturday evenings, depending on how it goes. And the only thing you really miss if you're on the edited version is just the pre-show where we bullshit for 10-15 minutes. That's basically all you miss. And you miss a whole bunch of ums on my part and Drew's part. That's basically it. So you can watch the edited versions also on audio versions as well, basically on any podcatcher that you want. If you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, head on over to that application right now. I swear to God, you'll be making you very happy by leaving us a review. Would love to get to 100 reviews by the end of the year. That'd be kind of awesome. So go do that. If you don't watch on Apple Podcasts, still go, and you have an Apple ID or whatever, go sign in and leave us a review. It doesn't matter. It'd be awesome if you could do that for us. It would be awesome. I need more adjectives, okay? It's also 9:30 at night. It's past this young guy's bedtime. Yeah, it's time to go to sleep. It's the end of the podcast, so that's it. So if you want to get in contact with us, you can do so in any number of ways. The best way is the email address. That's email@thelinuxcast.org. You can head on over to the website, which is kind of still under construction, at thelinuxcast.org. Drew is on YouTube. He has a YouTube called Just the Guy Linux, where he does awesome stuff on window managers and Debian and ButterFS and all sorts of stuff. Head on over to his channel. Give him a subscribe. Tyler, who's not here, Zany. YouTube.com/ZanyOG. You can give him a shout out as well. So that's it for this one. If you want to find all of our contact information, YouTube.com. It's thelinuxcast.org/contact. I tell you, I fuck the end of the podcast up every week. It's really weird. I think because I get to the Nuggies and my brain shuts down. Oh yeah,
it's almost over.
It's done. Don't need to think anymore. The words don't need to come out and actually make sense. It's fine. Anyways, that's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time. I promise. I can't make that promise and actually follow through with it. The ends aren't going to get any better. It's been 5 years. It's not going to happen. Anyways, we'll see you next time.
See ya.